webinar. Cameron, Ian, welcome. There may be other new faces, I just don't see them because I'm not dialing into the LinkedIn Live side. So
you got about 30 seconds till top of the hour, Derek.
okay.
Live stream is streaming, and I'm going mute for the duration.
Real good, thanks, Eric.
I'll give you a 5-second countdown. How about before I hit the launch?
Sure.
Record. All right. Recording in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody to the next episode in the top 12 application priorities of competitive intelligence webinar series I've been doing this year. Who doesn't like that sound of the till going cha-ching? This is kind of ka-ching, so I'm not sure what the play on that is. But I remember as a kid, so our mom was a beauty salon owner operator in northern Wisconsin. I can remember that sound as if it was yesterday. Just that little till coming open, and it kind of meant that something good happened, right? And I think that something good is about to happen over the next hour. I'm really excited that we have Graham Goodweiler and Elise Nockels here to debate this concept around how human intelligence helps sales and marketing win market share. So welcome, Graham, welcome, Elise. Thank you for being here with me today. It's a really fun topic, obviously one that's important to all facets of a business, because let's be honest, if you don't sell anything, and prior to that market said something, you aren't going to have very much of a business at all, right? I mean, can we all agree on that? So from the standpoint of how competitive intelligence supports directly the sales and marketing apparatus, even more importantly, or at least as importantly, how it indirectly supports it from the standpoint of things like product development, product management, finance, supply chain. You know, there's something, I think, for everybody in this webinar. And, you know, Graham, I guess I would throw it out to you. What do we think people are going to learn today in this webinar as we go through the next hour or so?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Excited to be here. Really, I think what's interesting here is we're kind of taking on a different approach to sales and marketing intelligence that you may be a bit more familiar with. We're really focusing on the people first rather than the technology and the tool sets that are applied with that. So as we're talking about this here, we'll also be looking at different customer segments and the different personas that are going to be involved, and really understanding the customer's perspectives, as well as the sales and marketing people as well. And then what other types of tools and things that can be used to help inform and make sure that the information that you're gathering is actually used and actionable by the sales and marketing professionals. And with that, yeah, Derek, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about some of the mindsets that we'll be incorporating.
Sure thing. You know, I read a book a year and a half ago. There's a book entitled To Sell is Human by Dan Pink. And it really had a pretty significant impact on me because, you know, whether you're in a direct selling type of role for your business, or you're supporting it in some other functional area of the enterprise, or you're a parent or a friend, or you name it, in all walks of life, we're really influencers, and we're trying to move people from point A to point B. Sometimes that's a school or a way of thinking about something. Other times it's quite literally you're saying something to get them to physically move from point A to point B, right? And that's where I think that this book has such impact, if you allow it. So thinking it through, you know, what Dan Pink does in this book, he sort of changes the nature of the old movie Glengarry Glen Ross from 1992, I believe, when that came out. It was based on a 1984 play. That whole concept of always be closing. We've probably all had experiences where people have tried to close us. Sometimes those are not such fun experiences. Let's be truthful about those. With Pink's book, he talks about it from the standpoint of attunement, buoyancy, and clarity, and really that opportunity to take a different person's perspective, the capacity to stay afloat amongst an ocean of possibilities, sometimes rejection, and then the ability to curate additional information and find problems to situations that the other party might have that they might not have even known that they had, that problem in the beginning. So that's why I like that book so much. Graham, when you see it from your perspective, kind of the setup for today's session, what is it about that book? I know I gave it to you as a suggested reading a little while back. What kind of impact did it have on you?
Yeah, well, honestly, I had a fairly negative or pejorative opinion on salespeople before reading it. It seemed like a very kind of a pariah profession, if you will, or kind of they're just trying to prey on people. And it really definitely opened up my mind to it and to understanding that we're all in sales in one way, shape, or form, whether it's influencing others, negotiating others in our personal lives as well as with our professional lives, with our customers as well as with our own people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So understanding that, it might be, your traditional perspective of sales, but we're all in it in one way, shape, or form. So hopefully some of this that we're talking about can transcend just your quick understanding or small understanding of traditional sales and really expand it to, everything that you might be interacting or relationships with people in general. And then kind of going along with that, we are just kind of really emphasizing the importance of people and understanding that, tool sets don't win sales deals, people do. There's a lot of art and craft that happens with sales that a tool set might, it might support it a little bit or make you just a little bit more, advance your skill set a little bit further. But really it's, the relationships and the rapport with people that really make the difference. And then understanding that, there's both different perspectives that you're going to be dealing with. We kind of have two here, which is your naive buyer, someone who's a little less experiences with the situation. They might be kind of get more caught up in the hype or, the sparkle ponies of the day, where you also have some of the reluctant skeptics who are a little bit more experienced. They'll have a lot of questions to ask. They know they have a problem, but they're not entirely sure that there's going to be a good solution for them. So you really have to understand where they're both coming from, and meeting them at their perspective and at their level. And going with that is kind of having a bottom-up perspective versus a top-down perspective. I think oftentimes companies or salespeople can kind of get this kind of overwhelming feeling from like top-down saying, okay, you need to get this many sales, you need to, get this next deal through the door. But really, we should be thinking about it from the customer's perspective first, and understand that they need a problem or they have a problem that needs a solution, and that you can have that help them figure out the solution that works best for them. And then the last part here is, pricing will always be a driver. So continue to think beyond that. If you talk to salespeople, I bet 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, if we just decreased our price 15% lower, we would have gotten the deal. But as we think about this, really come back to the value that you're providing and the solution that you're offering, rather than just trying to be the low-cost leader in every situation. At least we're talking about kind of having this transactionary mindset with sales oftentimes, but how are you incorporating some more of a missionary mindset in what you're doing?
That's a great question, because, we as CI professionals aren't necessarily selling to end users, but we're selling our services, we're selling our capabilities, we're selling our teams. But I think the way that you really incorporate that missionary mindset in a CI profession is you have to put yourself in their shoes. And as Graham clearly articulated, you have to understand the customer, understand the drivers and why they're making a change or why they're purchasing your solution or a similar solutions. Understanding that so that you can help write the right differentiation, the right positioning, the right kind of battle card content. But the other piece is you really have to get in the mindset and sit in the shoes of your sellers. A lot of CI people I've talked to have never, ever carried a bag. They don't know what it's like to go through the rejection, the constant, having to keep up tabs with, your current customer base. You have a lot of pressure from the upward management. So putting yourself in their shoes so you can understand why they may be asking for things that are very unattainable, why they have deadlines the way they do. And that will help you better be a better partner with them. And it won't be this is animosity of sales constantly asks me for things and it drags me away from the fun work that I want to do. And you change that mindset and more about, I need to help them, because as Derek said earlier, if you don't sell anything, you don't sell your services and your products, you won't have a company. So you have to support them in some way. So yeah, that's where the missionary mindset really comes in here, is putting yourself in their shoes and in their position.
Awesome. Thank you. And then, yeah, going on to this next step of the process here, really focusing on identifying with our customers and making sure that we're empathizing with them. And with that, on the next slide here, we'll kind of have an empathy map, if you will. This is a very common tool, but there are other tools out there. But really, the point of this is it's really simple, just trying to put yourself in their shoes and understanding what they're dealing on a day-to-day basis or an hour-to-hour basis. I think it's really common where people understand what a job is, but you don't really understand what they do. So putting this into perspective, you're trying to understand what they see, what they say, what they do, what they hear, what they think, what they feel. All of these different like senses that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis can really help you understand what problems they're actually going through and what problems you just perceive that they're going through from your perspective. Additionally, trying to understand what hurdles they have to go through, what hoops they're going through, what things can't they change, what things are a little bit more flexible with their work. Whether that be regulatory or with the people they work with or the data they have or the technology, really trying to look at it from all these different perspectives can get you a better definition, a better viewpoint on what they're dealing with and what problems they may be having. And going on to the next slide here, we're really focusing on, how are they searching for these problems that they have? The first part here is obviously defining what that problem is, how important it is, how time consuming, how frequent it comes up, whether it be a small thing or a large thing. That kind of all influences how important it is for them to find a solution, whether it be something they need right away or something they can take time on to figure out, make sure they have the right solution that fits their needs. And with that, how are they searching for it? We kind of have two options here, whether they're reaching out to people or whether they're searching for it through technology or through Google. Reaching out to people, who's advocating for you? Who are they reaching out to? Who are their mentors? Asking all of those questions. What are the channel partners or brokers saying? Or they just have some, market, material that they're constantly say to everyone? Or are they adding in their own experiences and perspectives into that? What are the influencers or key opinion leaders saying and reporting about this particular industry or this particular solution? So looking at all those people perspectives, as well as going to conferences and things like that, can help. Additionally, people are constantly these days looking at, just Googling solutions or Googling answers to things. So if you're looking at a problem, and it's important to understand how they define that problem, to understand what keywords they're using to find solutions for it. Is there a DIY solution that people often use instead of just trying to have to purchase something? Are you even on the first page of Google for those specific search terms that they're looking for? If they're not aware of you, then you're not even in the conversation. And oftentimes there's also different solutions that can fit the same problem. You might be thinking that your competitors are just all the different competitors with this particular, SaaS solution, but it could be a completely different solution that is also focused on the same problem that you're not familiar with. So make sure that you're kind of expanding your realm or your perspective of what a competitor is as you're looking at it from a problem perspective versus the solution perspective. And I know, Elise, you've been on both sides of this as being a buyer and a seller. I'm kind of going from, the people perspective and, just searching for things on, Google and reviews and things like that. How are you kind of defining, what is a trustworthy source and what are some of the red flags that you kind of look for?
There are so many red flags. I swear to God, it's getting worse and worse with AI, and you can't trust anything anymore. You see, really, for me, a trusted source is really if I can talk to someone, shake their hand in person, and hear what they have to say. And I can hear, intonation in their language. How are they looking away? Using those nonverbal cues to understand if something's true or not. That is the ultimate way to know if something is truly trustworthy. And then everything kind of cycles off after that. Like you said, with Google searching, if you're looking for a product to purchase something and you're using the first page of Google search, I'm telling you, you're missing out on a huge part of the market. The sponsored pieces, the sponsored page session, how people can get higher up on the searches it's a game. It's a dollar thing. And if you're not playing that game, you're losing out on business. But B, if you're a buyer and you're not really going and talking to your network and your colleagues and your friends to understand what's out there, you're possibly missing out on the best tool or the best capable solution out there. So really, if you can get to that personal human interaction, that's the best. And then you really have to triangulate. I think if you're forced to use secondary data, you've got to use multiple sources. Cannot take what the first hit on Google searches, what LinkedIn says, what Twitter says, or X says. You have to triangulate it. And if you can get a human contact that can validate whether something's trustworthy or not, that's going to be your ultimate way to know you're dealing with intel that you can work with.
If I may, so at least you're saying you represent Palo Alto Networks, at least at this moment in time, working in their Intel group. You're saying that it's not just about appearing in the right Magic Quadrant per se. It's you got to go deeper. Like that's not unimportant that your business invests in being in, the Magic Quadrant and Gartner and all the other stuff that comes along with it. But there's such an opportunity to go several layers underneath that. Is that right?
Right. I mean, they're starting with the Gartner Magic Quadrant, assuming that your industry even has one. Not every buying center has an MQ that you can go after and use, but that's a starting point. But the use cases are different. Your use case may not be exactly how Gartner evaluated those particular vendors. So there's other tools you need to go out there and use. You could use G2. You can use, there's a bunch of Forrester has, their own wave reports. There's multiple analyst reports out there that you can triangulate and then really read the reports, see how they were evaluated. And if your use cases aren't on that document as part of their methodology, then that's probably not the right map for you to be using. And that's why talking to people who are actually end users, Gartner Peer Insights is a great way to go understand how a product is actually being used and the good, the bad, and the ugly, because those are validated users of the products. And that way you could search in on certain use cases that you're trying to solve with your buying decision.
Yeah, I love that. And then like, as we're thinking about kind of understanding the problem, and understand the problem for your particular use cases, this next slide really understands how to frame that problem from their perspective. So understanding their own buying criteria and their customer, what are their choices that they're choosing to, be able to understand, why they're picking a particular product. And here at Aurora, we use this framework called superiority criteria to better understand, where they're coming from. We have this separated out into 3 sections or 3 categories, satisfiers, drivers, and disruptors. The satisfiers are, the basic elements that you absolutely need in a product. It's a binary, does it have it or does it not have it? If it doesn't, you're not interested in it, you're just going to move on to look for something else that does. We have a smartphone example here. And with that, when you're looking for a phone, it needs to be able to talk and text. You need coverage, you need internet connection, you need a camera. There's some things that you absolutely have to have in a phone. And if it doesn't have it, it's not even a phone in your eyes, right? It's just moving on to the next thing. And you really wanted to look for, the things that you must have. And then you get into the drivers. And these are the differentiators between companies. These are what companies are competing against. And, things like, your price, your call clarity, expanded call coverage, camera quality, your battery life, things like this that, you don't need to have, 100% for all of them. It's not possible, right? So you need to find a balance that works for your particular use case and understanding that different people will have different, preferences for each of these. So that's why you have the competition to be able to understand that, this phone works better in this situations or for this user, or another one works for another user. And this is how they're continuing to compete and innovate in those ways. And then third, you have disruptors. And these are your, emerging products, your innovators within the industry or the economy there, who are really trying to refocus and rethink how you're approaching a problem or a solution. So with a phone perspective, you could have the ability to change the screen size and shape. This really improves the ability to use the phone in many different ways and shapes and sizes. And then you could also have, a phone that, goes around your wrist. It can also be used as an accessory, so to speak. You can have draft emails and text for you, have, a phone, but also a personal, generative AI or conversational assistant all within one thing. But you're also saying, anti-smartphones where no social media, no interconnection. So it kind of gets rid of the distractions, but it also has all the modern amenities for a typical phone that you would want. So these are really making you really think, what are you actually looking for in a phone? And that's what these disruptors kind of do in an industry, and they kind of change how the landscape is played. So you need to come at a, from a customer's point of view, understanding, what are their satisfiers, what are their drivers, and then what could the potential disruptors be? And a good way to do that is through win-loss analysis, but you can also do that through secondary research as well. And then I think we're ready for the next section here. So now that we kind of understand, the customer's point of view and some of their perspectives and trying to define the problem, how are you collecting and analyzing information from competitors and the industry to better, evaluate them and put yourself up there in competition? So with the next slide, we're really focusing on, again, developing the right sets. for us, having the right mindset always comes first, and then skill sets, tool sets, and data sets. And we do have these kind of organized out. So customer first solution, that having that mindset, you also need to have analytical skills to go with it. Technology assisted human intelligence, and you need to have some technical skills to go with that. And sales and marketing collaboration with communication skills, having to do that storytelling and empathy. But you don't need to do one person does every single thing. It can be a team or a group effort. And then you're kind of going into a tool sets phase, which everything is colliding or coming together. So you can kind of break down some of these silos and work together within a tool system, that helps, navigate some of the complexities for the administration aspects of it, whether it be a CRM system, a monitoring system, different techniques, as well as, some of the non-tangible tools, such as working with people, having mentors, and people to really up level, your skill sets. And last year is the data sets. The key thing for data sets is focusing on actionable data sets that you can leverage, that you can change, and that you can manage. Oftentimes, I think we focus on the wrong data sets, such as, if you're looking at how many people, go to your website, that might be interesting information, but it's probably a better data to know how many of those websites go into leads, or what's your conversion rate for those things. Things like that might be a better data set to focus on. So what KPIs are you really looking at? And I know, Elise, we have a slide here talking about some of these personalities that we're looking for. I know I said it's not an individual effort. So what kind of team kind of personalities and perspectives are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, I'm kind of notorious for trying to pull in some kind of pop culture reference into anything CI related, just because I think it's a sickness. But one of the things I love to incorporate is Looney Tunes, because there's such a diverse character set, and it's a common thing. Most people know who Looney Tunes are, so you can understand how, like the correlation between the two. And, as Graham said, you don't need to be the single person that does all of these things excellently. You can find people with the right personality types to execute them well, because they have a natural inclination, a natural skill set to succeed in each one of these three categories, these mindsets or these skill sets. So if you think about from a customer first solution, people who are highly analytical, think of Sam the sheepdog. His customer was the sheep. He had to protect them from Ralph the wolf trying to eat them. He was singularly focused on protecting those sheep. You look at the tech, on the technology side, getting out, kind of geeking out on the technology and the nerdy bits. Who are the biggest nerds in Looney Tunes? Wile E. Coyote and Marvin the Martian. Look at some of the stuff they did. Marvin literally created a laser to blow up Venus because it blocked his view of the sun. And Wile E. Coyote has had so many things he's done with random technologies to try to outsmart the Roadrunner. And then lastly, on the sales and communication side, really being, the sales and marketing component, this is where you need those strong communication skills. And I always go back to Tweety. Tweety, you could literally give Tweety the worst product on the face of the earth, and Tweety would somehow find a positive way to spin it so that a customer would find value in buying it. And then there's Daffy. I mean, I swear to gosh, Daffy could talk himself out of any situation. He doesn't quite have the empathy that Tweety does. He's a little bit narcissistic, but he at least has the strong communication skills where he can help, get beyond certain barriers and certain obstacles, because he's a very, very smooth, fast talker. So a little bit of fun. Graham was a little hesitant. He's like, I don't know, is it going to work? But I'm like, we got to put some cartoons in here for fun. So thank you for putting up with my pop culturist tendencies for these things.
No, I love it. And it's a great way to incorporate how you can have very unique and different personalities, and they all can kind of focus on still, customer and marketing, intelligence. So it's not just a one size or one type of person can do it. Anyone can really incorporate and do these types of skills. And then kind of as we're talking about having alignment with the mindset, skill sets, and tool sets and data sets, kind of once you have those in picture, the things that you're focusing on, you also need to go back to, thinking back on the customer, what types of customers will have. Going to, again, the naive buyer and your reluctant skeptic. Your naive buyer is probably going to be focusing more on the perception. They're going to be, just doing some Google searching, going to look at the website traffic, marketing, collateral, blogs, press releases, social media posts, the things that, the company is putting out to make their products look, as best as possible. And you need to have that, you need to be able to research that information and understand where they're coming from, and understand that this is the perception that people have of these products. But you also need to understand, the truth behind the product too. And sometimes they don't align and sometimes they do. but you need to understand that there is sometimes a kind of a difference between, what you're looking for and what you're actually getting. We can all, I'm sure, have some experiences with that. But looking at this, you can typically look at, market share, earnings calls, things like that can give you some metrics. But really, the best way to do it is by, talking with people and getting on calls, having some primary research through, customer interviews, product teardowns, live demos, mystery shopping, win-loss analysis, things like this. As long as it's, ethical and legal within your industry and your company that, they approve of it. Things like this can really help you get a better understanding of the product and how it's actually working. I also included review sites on here. You can kind of go either way with review sites. You really need to have a discerning eye. Some of them you can tell is, an honest, legitimate review that gives some, pros as well as a couple cons of the products. And other of them is just 5 stars and you feel like it's just a bot or some random person that doesn't really test it out. So you do have to have a better discerning eye with review sites, but being able to research, both the secondary research as well as primary really gives you the full picture of a product and the competition that you're focusing with. And then going with that, there's different ways to have different collection methods for this. Generative AI here is a very common tool that people are using nowadays, but it just does have its own specific use cases. So generative AI is really just trained on, whatever you train it, right? OpenAI is just information from April 2023 and earlier. But you can also have internet-enabled ones or, RAG models that are focused on the information that you're specifically giving it yourself. Secondary research, obviously, is anything that you can Google or find on the internet. And primary research is, the people that you're connecting with, the customers, industry experts, the competitors, employees, and things like that. So getting really kind of boots on the ground experience and talking with those people. The great thing with primary research is asymmetric. Nobody really has that information. It's not easy to get. But it is rich and tailored to your specific needs. So you can ask a very specific question and you'll get a very specific answer back. However, it can take time to identify that and connect with sources. But once you kind of have that done, you can kind of repeat and go back to sources over and over again, depending on how you have that, how you kind of left the door open or not. Whereas on the flip side with generative AI, is extremely fast and affordable. I think Professor Wheaton said on a call not too long ago, it's a blazingly fast but extremely average analyst. And I think that still reigns true. It is, it's not up to date. It can hallucinate, but it is, super fast and super easy for quick backgrounders of information, as well as getting some formatting things done to tailor it to your customer and your needs. And we'll go into each of these on the next slides. I do want to start with generative AI and some of these use cases. On the next slide, the first one here is really just understanding your customer. This kind of goes back to your empathy map, if you will. So asking it, from a customer's perspective, what problems would they likely have in their day-to-day work? And this would take information from, job reviews, job boards, as well as, kind of about information on the roles. So it really gives you that quick first glimpse or image into a role and understanding what they're doing. But you can also format information to their specific role and put it into their language or their vernacular. So you can put in a template of, what you want to say and then have it, format it within a language that they understand, whether it be, putting in bullets or having, terms that their industry uses that aligns better with their understanding and their jargon. Can be a great way to help tailor information for the individual customers. And then I've also had success with using it for kind of doing some sales call simulations. So if you add in like a system prompt, you can kind of go back and forth with it. So here I had a prompt where I said, you're a customer interested in purchasing a product, use the following principles in responding to a salesman. So I kind of gave it this like reluctant skeptic approach. So then it would, we could go back and forth on different questions that they would have, and I could test out different answers and different responses to it. So I don't have to use up, a qualified lead in order to test out or start out on, figuring out what works best. And this can be really helpful for someone who's just becoming a salesperson and just trying to get some initial experience, as well as if you have a new product or trying out a new product, figuring out what sells better, what makes sense, what types of questions you're going to get, what might people, fight back on. And things like that, you can quickly do that initially with a generative AI or conversational AI system instead of dealing with people at first. And then you can kind of lead into those conversations with more confidence going up. And now, Elise, I know you have a webinar coming up about this specific topic. So I really want to get, a bit of a teaser into that. What other generative AI use cases have you been using with CI specifically for kind of some of this marketing and sales intelligence roles?
Yeah, Grandma, I love your enthusiasm and your interest in using Gen AI. I am a get off my lawn on this one. I'm still very old school on Gen AI and its applicability to CI specifically. So I have rules within my team that we literally do not I will not let them use that for competitive monitoring. You can't take a new article that comes out and hit summarize now and then use that as your analysis, because the main reason is you're not absorbing that intel. So in a sales and marketing capacity, if you're not you're using ChatGPT or Gen AI to generate how you'd communicate with a customer, you are missing out on the key nuances of how your company should communicate. You're not absorbing necessarily how your sales enablement team wants you to position our products. You're using a tool that can hallucinate, that I don't trust as far as I can throw it. And you can get yourself in some serious trouble, and you negate the value of your brain by absorbing things, reading things, instilling what you're pulling out those insights yourself. You're locking that knowledge inside your brain, and you can reference that later on to baseline, wins and losses, where you're losing today versus where you are not, in the future. Competitive dynamics, market dynamics, all of those things that are really key to a CI professional. If you hit summarize now, you're not absorbing anything. So where we use it, so I will say there's a few aspects where we can use it, because I'm not going to be totally get off my lawn. But one is where you've written a lot of content already, or you take something that maybe from your sales enablement team, or you take something from your marketing team. You can hit that content and use some of these summaries and use some of these manipulative techniques in Gen AI to generate communication, because you're leveraging things that have already been vetted internally. You're still absorbing it. You could then better check whether or not the outputs you're getting are accurate. And the only other way I allow my team to use Gen AI is when you do performance reviews. Like, seriously, don't care, hit summarize now, go for it. Those are really the aspects where I'm at personally. And what Graham was referring to is Skip in 2 weeks is having a conference is very much focused on AI. And one of the sessions, actually there's 2 sessions when I looked at the agenda this morning, only 2 sessions are countering the impact of AI. Everything is very pro AI, so very much on the Graham bandwagon. And there's only 2 sessions, and one of them is a panel I'm with several other high-tech people to really give you guys some skepticism about using AI and being careful how you apply it into your CI jobs. So that's coming up at Skip. I think we're on Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, love it. And I think you're totally right. I don't think it's going to replace a lot of the things that we're currently doing with competitive intelligence. However, I do think, giving different perspectives or first drafts on things, or some of these like external competitive intelligence roles or jobs that we're doing, that it's more of the tailoring. I think it can do really well. But to your point, it's always most important to fully understand the subject and the things that you're talking about, the things that you're reporting, because at the end of the day, it's your name on the material and anything that's coming out. And you can't just put the blame on, the AI did it and not me. So you definitely need to have that, full experience and full trust and confidence in the information that you're putting out.
That's kind of very much aligned with what I'm hearing out there in terms of the value of the competitive intelligence analyst, still being able to kind of think historically as well as more predictively. And this AI engine can certainly stand to have some value in there, but it has to be used correctly. And then a well-trained CI analyst with prompts and everything else, that's going to be where they kind of separate their value from those that don't sort of embrace the reality that that's going to need to be, a part of their job, but understanding the limitations, particularly around hallucinations and other things. That's an important part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So next, I just want to quickly touch on secondary research. I know we've all Googled before, so I'm not gonna read through the basics for everyone, but there are some things that are important specifically within, marketing and sales intelligence that are worth mentioning. The first part, as always, we're just gonna start with the mindsets here, and just make sure that you're spending the right time up front answering and making sure that you're identifying the right questions first. Too often, I think people just go into something and just, okay, I can just Google this and figure it out. But then you kind of go on this, down a rabbit hole, or you're just searching for way too much information, and you kind of lose track of what you're supposed to find, and it doesn't end up being actionable. So making sure that you kind of tailor down what your search is at first as much as possible, to have a more narrow and defined focus on Google, you'll be better off. There's just so much information out there that you really need to filter down what you want. Additionally, coming with that is there's a lot of information that's out on Google, but there's also a lot of information that's not available and not on Google. So as you're going through your research and at the end of the research process, keep reflecting back on what's missing, what's not available. And oftentimes going back through those and asking those questions can help you define and figure out, what are the real questions that you should have been asking, what things might need some more primary research. And that can sometimes be more important, in understanding what's not there than what is there. And some search techniques and tips I've found specifically with this is, any type of search routines where you're just doing the same searches or same keywords over and over again, any way that you can monitor that using either a current awareness software platform or Google Alerts or whatever works well for you. Definitely do that so you can spend more time focusing on the analysis component as well as, your individual ad hoc research. I always use file type PDF for a lot of stuff for looking at specific competitors, but there are other, Google search operators that you should be aware of and that you should be using. So I'd recommend looking it up if you're not familiar with them. The advanced tools are the kind of hitting the tools button on Google after a search comes up. If you're not familiar with that, the date search or the date range I use on a daily basis. Consistently look at back 24 hours in news for certain things to see what's new, what's coming out there. But I've also used it in different situations, such as I'm looking back at, when an acquisition happened or when a product was released, what information was also published around that period of time. So, being able to filter out Google results can really help, hone in on your process and weed out a lot of the noise that, Google can have. And last, but definitely not least, specifically for sales and marketing intelligence, is do not forget about social media. It's easy to just Google things and see what comes up, but always double check because, things that come up on YouTube or on Instagram or whatever you may be using aren't just going to be indexed on Google and just come up in the search results. So always double check with those, specifically with this, YouTube, Vimeo, even occasionally TikTok can be really helpful for understanding some of the unboxing videos or tutorials or demos and things like that companies put out about their products that you're not going to just find on the competitor website. So looking at videos for these things can be super helpful and really informative. And additionally, identifying key people to follow on LinkedIn and Twitter or X or Threads and those platforms as well. You might initially think, just focusing on, director of sales or chief marketing officer, but also focus on, the individual salespeople and marketing people that just post a lot. Oftentimes, they're trying to, move up quickly or want to have a stronger presence online. So looking at those people and the information that they provide, you often get some great nuggets of information. Elise, did you have anything to add on to that? And then I also wanted to ask on, typically we see, secondary research, particularly when we combine it with competitive intelligence, analytic techniques come involved, with SWOT or, Porter's Five Forces or Four Corners or whatever it may be. How does that really fit in with sales and marketing intelligence? Does it fit in? What is some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, I think you covered, the reason why how secondary is so important. I just would highlight triangulation, making sure that you're not taking one source as gospel. And then also making sure that you're seeing and watching how a product is being sold. It's one thing to know differentiators and feature function and all that stuff that like a traditional CI analyst would look at, but if you're not watching or reading or hearing how a competitor positions their product and what their sales motion is, you're missing out on that key component, that empathetic, get in the mind of the seller, get in the mind of the buyer. You lose that empathetic quality if you don't really dive into that piece. But from an analytic technique perspective, that's a great question, Graham. I get that a lot because we have some great tools that we use internally as CI practitioners. My only caution is don't ever send a SWOT or a Four Corners, anything in that format to your sales team. They don't understand and they're gonna get lost in the detail. You use those techniques internally. You use them to frame what a competitive landscape looks like, how the markets are evolving, your threats, how the markets are going to attack you, how you attack them. All of those strategic moves are all very important and captured in a wide variety of analytic tools. But you never share that actual SWOT analysis with sales. Instead, you have to distill the points that matter to them. You don't care about some of the maybe opportunities and threats. They care about strengths and weaknesses. Where is this competitor going to destroy me, and where can I destroy them? So you have to distill it down to the audience. And again, it gets back into the getting in the seller's mindset, knowing what they need to know to be successful and not inundating them with all of the other things that are unnecessary.
Yeah, love that. And as you're doing, potentially a battle card or something like that, it probably does make sense to incorporate some analytic techniques and from the making of it. But like you said, you don't need to see the full thing and have a really long, comprehensive report.
It's where if I may just jump in, by being able to build the more comprehensive profile on these competitors, that comprehensive profile might not be needed by sales and marketing, but you have an opportunity as an intel group to expand your reach and influence across the enterprise. So your strategy team might need parts of that more comprehensive profile, product development, finance, et cetera. And it's not, I don't think the message is don't do that more comprehensive assessment. It's just be really careful about information overload to the sales and marketing teammates in order to get them kind of what they need, meeting them where they are, and demonstrating a quicker reaction process and time to value creation. That's the important takeaway here. It's not to stop doing full-fledged competitive assessment. I don't believe. Is that
no, not at all.
takeaway?
I apologize if that's how it came across. I believe all of those tools are necessary for a CI practitioner to succeed, but we have to tailor what pieces go to what parts of our organization to make them more actionable. Because if you give them, I know reading is hard. Reading is incredibly hard these days. No one does it. They want it in chunks, Twitter chunks, right? Have 240 characters. And so you got to bite size it so people can digest it, action it, and move on. And then you give them the next chunk. So it's take those analytic techniques, put them on your Google Drive, put them on your hard drive, use them, reference them, update them, but never share them outside of your CI team.
Yeah, no, love that. And then, of course, as we're supplementing secondary research, we want to incorporate primary research, and this really helps you get a better, deeper, richer understanding of the products and the people that you're working with. One example of that is win-loss analysis, but on the next slide, we'll also mention trade show intelligence or conference intelligence. But for win-loss analysis, the real point is really trying to understand your customer preferences, their buying behavior, and trying to understand some of the competitive strengths and weaknesses your product has, as well as some of the other products within the market that they might be looking at. Some of the tips that we've found is, obviously focus on wins and losses. It's in the name, but also look at, some of the multi-wallet customers. So people who, switch products frequently, as well as people who have, I've gotten multiple products that have slightly different solutions or slightly different use cases. And so they'll have a more knowledgeable, experienced opinion, both based on, a number of different factors. So they might be more of your, reluctant skeptic point of view. But then you also have, people who might be your target customers, but have no awareness or no idea who you are. And they're also helpful to interview just so you can understand, maybe they don't have the same problem that other people have, and you might have to redefine who your target audience or your target market is. Or you might not have, the type of visibility that you thought you did, or they might be reaching out or using different sources that you weren't even aware of. So being able to understand from their perspective as well can really help round out your win-loss analysis activities. And then win-loss analysis can be used in just about everything that we've mentioned so far, from the superiority criteria to empathy mapping to some of the getting more understanding of the different competitors and what they're doing and the perception versus reality part. Win-loss can help with all of those things that we've mentioned so far. And the last kind of key thing I wanted to mention here is just making sure that the questions that you're asking are actionable and as business oriented as possible. It's super easy for people that you're interviewing or doing working with elicitation on to just get fatigued after a period of time. Don't go beyond 20 questions, absolute maximum for these types of activities, and making sure that you're getting more deep, rich information that really helps flesh out the information that you want to know. So as much as you can, focus on asking those critical questions and refining those questions ahead of time makes the work easier, so you don't have to keep going back to people. We have a few questions here, but make sure that they're tailored to your own individual company and your own purposes and use cases and the data sets that you're using and trying to apply and leverage. Elise, I know when we talked about this, you had a bunch of wins and losses of your own relating to win-loss. So what are some of the lessons learned from your win-loss experiences?
I could literally take an entire hour webinar on this lessons learned bit, because I've tried and I started and stopped many win-loss programs and learned a lot of the don't do's of how to build these things out. And what I've come up with in the last 20 years of trying to build this out and do it the right way is a couple things. Is one, if you're interviewing only your account teams and your sales teams, you're missing out on a ton of intel and you're getting a very biased perspective, because it's filtered information. If you think about it, if you're at a restaurant and the meal's terrible, the waiter comes by and says, "How was the meal?" You're like, "Ah, great, great." And then you tell your friend, "This is the crappiest thing I've ever eaten in my life." You're not going to tell the direct person that you bought from necessarily your feedback. But if you engage with the third party, independent third party, like Aurora, like any one of these other, win-loss companies, they will interview on your behalf where it becomes more comfortable. They can be more candid. And they can get to those critical questions that Graham articulated earlier, without that additional bias. The other aspect I love about hiring a third party is it takes the sales aspect out of it. The person that you're interviewing no longer feels they're being sold to. Because if you're out there interviewing your customers, kudos to you for finding the time to do it. That's awesome. But you're also getting a filtered view because they are, you are still representing your company. So having that independent viewpoint and interviewing the actual customers, not the sellers, is magnitudes different in the results you get and the fact that it's far more actionable when you do it with third party and interview customers. That's probably the biggest lesson learned, but we can do a webinar some other day where we go through all of the problems around win-loss.
Graham, it might make sense to take a couple of these questions in the context of this slide. You see these coming in the chat, or you want me to voice them out loud?
Yeah, you're welcome to voice them out loud.
Yeah. Question in for you, Elise. How much of your work is on wallet share of current customers and discovering how much they spend in a given category, and then formulating how to take that wallet from an existing client? That is extremely hard to do because you're relying on a lot of it's really hard to do that internally and to trust the data. There's third parties that can come in and help you build that analysis, but it's really hard to trust it necessarily. So you really have to validate it with human interaction. So these tools that can be integrated into your CRM and such that can tell you what your wallet share is overall. You always want to go validate it with a friend, with a colleague, with a LinkedIn post, with secondary, somehow to validate those numbers. But yes, that is a great technique because if you have a large portfolio, you're only selling one little small widget to that customer, the upsell opportunity is huge. Getting new greenfield accounts, initial business sales are so hard. But if you can do an upsell or cross-sell, holy Hannah, you've got a way easier sales process to go through because you're already trusted in this one component. Then you've got to figure out techniques to get the other business units, the other sections of that customer company to buy into your larger portfolio. Yep. Related to that, do you use sales to discover these new product ideas that the company might invest in? Yes, with a grain of salt. Because every salesperson is a snowflake and every opportunity is a snowflake. It's not very special and needs to be handled perfectly. The way you do that is you have to collect that feedback in a centralized mechanism so that you can look for priorities and look where trends are happening. If you take every single piece of feedback you get from every single individual salesperson you work with, your R&D team will be completely overwhelmed. It's your job as the analyst to distill what is the most important aspects. And are they truly value drivers for a customer? Or are they just random differentiator things that some very niche customer wants that no one else in the world will buy? That's your job to distill that. But yes, get that feedback, but then filter it down before you present it to R&D with your recommendations. Let's pause on the questions. We see them all coming in. You all love that they're getting filtered to us. Graham, let's make sure we get through our content and we'll come around to some more questions here in a minute.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so the next slide here, we're talking about trade show intelligence or conference intelligence. I just want to get through a couple of key points here. Really, this is so great for collecting quick, up-to-date information on everyone at once, including your competitors, as well as kind of the boots on the ground, if you will, some of the customers' perspectives and their own perceptions. Getting an opinion from just about everyone all at once. It's more in depth than doing a secondary research and looking through things online. But it's probably not quite as in depth as doing an individual primary research and elicitation work with one individual person and having a more in-depth program. But it can help you get move that needle further and getting information that you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. And again, all at once, it's kind of low-hanging fruit in a lot of industries, but I also understand that certain industries, it's a lot more difficult to do it successfully and do it very well. And in order to do that well, the key point here is just to make sure that you're putting in all the work ahead of time, and so you can kind of go into it with confidence and with stride. So being able to figure out, what the collection plan is, memorizing your kicks and things ahead of time, so you know exactly what you should be asking, practicing out a number of conversations, so some of your lead-ins, some of your segues, what types of questions you should be asking to specific people, figuring out which people you want to hit, where they might be located, understanding where perhaps the after party might be in different situations. Always be collecting with this. With trade show intelligence, because people are always, willing to, talk and have a conversation with, other people who are friendly and willing to talk. So some of that information is just absolutely key, just practicing ahead of time. So you're able to just go into it knowing exactly what you need to do and take notes as quickly as possible as, you're kind of going through these conversations. Elise, I kind of want to ask you two questions here. Hopefully they're not too long. The first one is, I know you are going through some trade show intelligence coming up. I wanted you to just talk about quickly a little bit about quarterbacking and what that entails. And then two, I wanted to get into this ROI for primary research. How do you actually maximize that and what makes sense for you?
Okay. Big meaty questions. So from a quarterback perspective, if you have a team, or people even outside of your team that you can leverage as a quarterback, absolutely do that. And what a quarterback does is basically leads the show. And I like to do it back from home. A lot of my conferences are out in the West Coast. The huge benefit is I'm in Central Time Zone. And I'm ahead of all of them. They're still sleeping when I'm reading all of the news articles and announcements coming out. So I can summarize and then send that to the team before they even put their shoes on to hit the trade floor. That gets you ahead of all of the announcements, gets key questions that you need to answer. Quarterbacks also collect key intelligence questions and topics from your stakeholders. But key thing here is don't ever use kits and kicks with your internal stakeholders. Again, they don't know what any of that means. Use questions like, what would you like to know about the competitors? Like, be very generic or specific, but don't use terminology that we use in our industry because they don't get it. We tried that once and it was a bomb. Ask them, like, what do you need to know? What kind of initiatives do you have coming? So you can get that set up ahead of time. When you get into the ROI bit, there's so many things one can do. If you have friends that are competitors, but in adjacent industries, or even compete in the same vein, one thing that we found very successful is you can leverage each other. Go partner with them potentially if you want to approach a vendor booth, or have someone else ask some questions on your behalf if you can trust them and you have divided, you're not breaking any of your confidentiality and things. You're not sending anything that's highly proprietary to them, but have them engage in a conversation to understand a new feature. If they're a non-competitive threat where your badge may set you off and they won't talk to you, be flexible, be willing to hit a booth multiple times, look for different folks that are attending those booths. If you have fail on one time, go in an hour later when they do a booth shift. Bring in different people, play different characters. And then the big one you want to do is follow your personality. My personality is hit the bar at midnight and talk to all the people when they've had a couple cocktails. That is my true way of collecting intel. I have other folks who are just straight up, will flat out say, my name is X, I am from this company, and I am a competitive intelligence analyst, and I want to know what your roadmap is. Literally can just go in there and do that, and we'll get intel being direct. So know your personality, know your strengths, and leverage those during primary collection.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're continuing to incorporate, being your own individual self and you're kind of being human without, throughout the entire process here. And it's not just, following a script or a template of whatever you're working with.
Yep.
So, along with that, as we're getting into this next step here, really being able to communicate and tailor the information to the individual sales and marketing people. The important part here is being able to actually tailor it to them. This would normally be the part in the conversation where we would give you some type of templated battle card situation, but that's not really how we operate here. It's really just making sure that you are, having the information that is tailored to them and that you're focusing on the value that the product brings rather than trying to, force fit a solution that, might fit their problem or not. To do that, you really need to talk to your sales reps, your sales channels, and understand how they work. Akin to what Elise was saying earlier, having empathy with them and kind of maybe even going through an empathy map with them to understand, are they in person or are they, doing all their calls virtually? What types of questions are they asking? Can you attend a demo to understand what that process is like? So just understanding what their, what each individual experience looks like to better understand how that information that you give them can be tailored and can be actually used versus just, a giant book on their desk that they're not going to have time to flip through during a conversation. So make it, concise, digestible, actionable as much as possible, and continue to experiment. There's a lot of turnover within salespeople. So, you have a lot of chances at a first impression here. So continue to change and update things over time. And I know it's like, as I did mention this before during our reps, Elise, you did kind of talk, have different opinions for me about the sales and reps and how to approach them. My first thought is, go with them and, tailor it to exactly what they want and to their needs to make sure that's actually being used. But I know you had different experiences with that. So I wanted to make sure your opinion is included there.
Sure. Yeah, I come from I have 7,000 sellers or something ridiculous, and everyone needs a custom tailored deliverable for them. But my team is not big enough to accommodate that. So you have to look at scalability. This is why priorities are really important. Make sure you're prioritizing your competitive scenarios around strategy and tactical, who's strategic, who's tactical. And if there's a tier 3 competitor that isn't that strategic and isn't that tactical, why go create a separate battle card? Because that's what sales will ask you for. If you don't really refine the questions and get to know what they really need, that's their initial ask. So you go create a battle card, you post it on your, your intranet, and then it gets stale, and then people are leveraging that when it's outdated because you're not looking at it. So instead, if you can come up with generic differentiators for each of your products and then slap those in on a page that has those tier 3 competitors and say to all the tier 3 competitors, use these differentiation statements, use these sales tactics, they will work 95% of the time. That's the good enough scenario where you can then scale. If you have a team where you can accommodate every sales request and tailor every deliverable, kudos to you. Most of us do not have that kind of capability or capacity. So we have to really streamline and scale the program the right way.
Yep, love that. And then we have one last really major content slide, and this is really rounding it out and putting the human back into everything that we're talking about, right? So really focusing on, managing or reducing their uncertainty. So really what's holding them back from, making the decision, making the plunge, asking those questions and kind of reducing those as much as possible or working with them to find the right solution for them. Always emphasizing, rapport and trust with them instead of countering every point and making sure that you're right, switching from this mindset of, compete and win to maybe inform and grow. And part of this is, the Transparency Sale, the book by Ted Capone. He has a big component in this is that it's kind of better to have, a 4.2 to a 4.5 star rating on, a review than it is to have a 5-star rating because people trust a 4.2 to a 4.5 more. So then you take that into sales, what does that really mean? And that really is talking about, leading with your flaws, leading with, okay, this product works really well in these situations, but for these use cases, you're better off going with this other competitor. And just being honest about, understanding that different competitors have different products and different differentiators, and understand that, your customers' preferences might be different depending on the different situations that they're dealing with. So it's totally okay to say, this one works better for you in this instance, but let me know if you have someone else that you can work with. Or if your needs change over time, and come back to me. And that really helps build a long-term rapport rather than just having it be more transactional. And with that transactional point and perspective, how do you switch that perspective from just being very transactional, like in and out, get the deal, to having a more long-term trusted advisor role with your stakeholders, at least?
I think it really comes down to exactly what you said. It's honesty. If you're just, giving them constantly goodness, awesomeness, wonderfulness about your products and never ever giving them the gotchas, oh wait a minute, these might come up, these are our definite weaknesses. You're setting yourself up for, oh, they're just a spinner. You're just spinning this intel into something that I might use, but you're not telling me what the landmines are. You got to be honest. And when you come back to that, there are opportunities where you should walk away. Literally walk away. No seller wants to hear that, but that's the truth. Why waste your cycles on an opportunity is not going to be won. You can help try to reframe what the customer is looking to buy into how you could possibly fulfill that requirement. But that's a harder opportunity to win because they've already had their mindset on this particular box, this widget. And if you don't fit that mold, why are you going to bang your head against a wall? So being that person that can say, here's the intel I have, here's the honest truth. And in the other piece about building trusted advisor role, and this is in sales, this is in R&D, this is everywhere, is when you say you're going to deliver something, you damn well deliver it, and you deliver it on time, of quality. And if you can't deliver something, you give a heads up, you make sure that they know you can't do it, and you tell them why. And that's how you build that trusted advisor role, and where you can be a trusted member, an extension of the sales and marketing team.
Love that. Yeah, really appreciate all those experiences there, Elise. And yeah, Derek, I think you want to say something here.
Well, I'm going to just take one more question.
Yeah.
It has to do, Elise and Graham, with managing confidentiality in the context of win-loss. So how do you do it? Number one, how do you manage that confidentiality when management really wants to know the real details of what went wrong in that opportunity? Imagine some of it has to do with whether or not the research subject believes it to be a blinded or a non-blinded situation. What beyond that, lends itself to the confidentiality question?
Graham, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Well, the first thing I guess I would say, I'm just going to go quickly here, and this is from our experiences being, other consultant for this type of thing, is working with a third party here is super helpful. Having a double-blinded study is really helpful here, and that's where the advantage of going through a third party really comes in handy, is being able to work with people that and you trust that they're talking with the right people, and then they'll just give you the names or essentially the roles that they're dealing with, or even just the industry. So anonymize it as much as possible, and don't even give them the opportunity to get further information, or don't give them the transcripts, just give them the finished compiled reports. And Elise, from your more hands-on
complete
experience.
Opposite end of the spectrum. I throw confidentiality out the window. I don't even do blinded. I go straight in and say, I'm from Palo Alto Networks. I'd like to understand why you did not or did choose our product, or you have a third party do that on your behalf. I find that by being honest about who is asking for the feedback, you get more direct results. You get more direct, candid feedback about you, not about generalities. And people, if you find the right people in the organization, they will tell you what you need to know. So I really don't worry about it. And if they really are worried about confidentiality, then they're probably not people I need to talk to.
Yeah. Well, we're at time, so I'm going to do a really quick wrap up here. If you've enjoyed today's session and you want to talk, just no strings attached conversation around how you incorporate things like advanced secondary and human intelligence into sales and marketing, for the companies you serve, I'm always available. Graham, I know you're always happy to have that conversation. At least I'm sure you are as well. Pretty accessible individuals. There's a certain degree of training that could come along with this, whether it be win-loss, trade show, and conference collection, other kind of sub techniques within the intelligence discipline, and of course, we could discuss, how an agency partner like ours, our firm here at Aurora, could do that for you. Looking ahead to the next sessions in this series, I'll give you a second to jot down these emails if you like for Graham and Elise. Looking ahead to May 9th, we're doing a session on knowledge management and the role that competitive intel plays in it. I think there's going to be a few different angles that we'll take to that particular session. And then Elise, you've got a Palo Alto Networks email that we invite people to tag, as well as this one on the screen. Is that right? So we'll put all that into the LinkedIn thread about this session. And so May 9th on knowledge management, out to June 13th on IP exploitation and protection. Just want to thank everybody, and especially you, Elise and Graham, for putting this session together. I didn't do a lot. You all worked hard to bring this topic to life, and I sincerely appreciate it. I want to wish everybody on the feed, a a great remainder of your day, your week ahead. And I hope that we have a chance to get to know one another in the future. So Elise, I'll see you in Nashville here in a couple weeks.
Yep. So I'll be there with bells on.
There you go. Graham, thank you very much. Elise, have a great
Yeah,
rest
of
of your
course,
day.
anytime.
Bye guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
See ya.